Hey folks, it's Nate. Thanks for joining me at the art table again today. I wanted to do a video today on the force of nature character. If you watched my most recent video on Battle Angel Alita, you already know what inspired this topic. I talked in that video about the character of Zappin, and in that discussion, I mentioned that I thought he was more of a force of nature than a fully fledged character in and of himself. These kind of characters are not uncommon in fiction, and they tend to get a bad rap. That's not fair in my opinion. Typically, these characters are called flat, uninteresting, and one-dimensional. The fact of the matter is, you can make these characters very interesting, both in and of themselves and in what they say in the story you are writing. But before we talk about that, let me just really quickly define what I mean by a force of nature character. I use this term to refer to a character who embodies a principle, an idea, or a natural process. For the purposes of today's discussion, 3 examples of force of nature characters include Zappin, as I have already mentioned, Death from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, and the Ghost of Christmas Present from Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Of course, you could put all of the ghosts into the force of nature category, but I'm going to use the Ghost of Christmas Present because I think he has the biggest impact on the story as a character. Let me start with the example I've already discussed at length on this channel, that is Zappin. He is a character who represents the idea of karma, an idea that things you have done in the past will eventually catch up with you, and you have to deal with the implications of your past mistakes. Zappin himself was wronged by Alita because he was unjustly attacked and injured by her in the past. He also is influenced by her very careless treatment of a very powerful thing she was entrusted with, the Berserker body, which he eventually fuses with, creating a very implacable foe that Alita has to deal with. Zappin does not spend a lot of time explaining himself or why he's doing what he's doing. There is no rhyme or reason to his actions from his point of view. He's really just taking them to cause difficulty for Alita, and he is doing this because he represents karma, a thing that comes back and causes you difficulty just as you cause difficulty to others. He's not the best example of a force of nature character, a point I made as I was analyzing him in my previous video, but he is kind of representative of the way we see them turn up in fiction in most cases. They take a few examples from the story which embody an idea, and then the impact of those elements on the characters in the story or on the plot is greatly emphasized to show that we are dealing with something that is more than human, that enters into a realm of pure concept and idea, a very mystical place where the abstract is personified. Death from Puss in Boots: The Last Wish also does this in a much better way. He embodies the natural process by which all things die. While death is a concept to most people who have not yet died, it is also something that just about everybody is going to experience. So by giving it a voice and giving it the opportunity to talk to somebody who has cheated it several times, we get to look at the concept of death through the lens of its inevitability and through the impact that has on people who have never thought about that inevitability before. We see how ingratitude and recklessness actually increases the terror of death to a man who has always taken life for granted. By embodying death in this way, we not only get some really great dialogue between Puss and Death, we also get to represent the change in Puss's approach to dealing with death over the course of the story. First, he runs from it, and that makes his life cheaper and less fulfilling. It is only when he is fully prepared to grapple with death that he can enjoy the life that he has right now. And it is only when he shows gratitude to the people who make his life worthwhile that he finds in him the courage to grapple with death. This is not reckless abandon as we see from him at the beginning of the movie. This is actual courage, a determination to go through with something in spite of the consequences it may have for him. Now, you can tell this story without having to personify death. I think Edge of Tomorrow actually does this very well. But by creating a character who is simply the force of nature that is death personified, you can create a very different kind of conflict, and one that is just as interesting as the conflict in Edge of Tomorrow. Furthermore, although death is a force of nature, he is still interesting, because his determination to take a life that Puss is not showing gratitude for puts a new spin on his character. He is not just some inevitable consequence of living that we will eventually run into. He is actively set against people who do not respect him. That is fascinating, and it's not something we would have gotten if death was just an abstract event and not a personified character who was in direct conflict with our protagonist. Now, the Ghost of Christmas Present is also an idea personified. He represents the thoughts and prayers and wishes of everyone on Christmas Day, when it is Christmas Day, and only when it is Christmas Day. Of course, he grows old and he dies at the end of Christmas. Right away, that's very interesting. This is a person who lives for only one day. That's his entire life, 24 hours. Yet during this time, he celebrates with every person in the world. But he is not just a character about celebration and merrymaking. He also has to grapple with the likes of Ebenezer Scrooge. He has a duty to Ebenezer Scrooge to make him see the good that is done by recognizing the power of Christmas in the human heart. And he is also a warning against rejecting the good that Christmas brings. He forces Scrooge to grapple with ignorance and want, the two children of man that have been rejected and now cling to him. The tapestry of possibilities that a character like Christmas Present presents to the audience is fascinating. He is mirth and joy personified, but he is also a dire warning of what can happen to us if we take for granted what we have been given. Or worse, if we reject the gifts outright and instead choose to go our own way in bitterness and loneliness. Like his brothers in the past and the future, the Ghost of Christmas Present has a powerful impact on Scrooge's understanding of the world and on his attitude towards Christmas itself. Having these characters here personifying these ideas and showing the full breadth and scope of the impacts they can have on our lives is a great way to show a broad spectrum of how an abstract concept can impact a character. Or it can just allow for really great exchanges of dialogue, really great character interactions between a single subject and this abstract concept. These characters don't have to have the nuance and the breadth of scope that you see in a normal human character. They can be very focused on this one idea, and in focusing very hard on that one idea, much like a crystal lens, they can split the normal human experience into a spectrum of different kinds of narratives. Rather than showing how people are nuanced in the ways they approach different situations, they show the way people are nuanced by showing how the same situation can be seen a little bit differently from the ways you approach it. Or, in the case of a force of nature character, the way it approaches you. While it is very important to have believable, well-rounded, deep, and multifaceted human characters in your story, not every character has to fit these definitions. And if you want to embody a concept as a character, don't be afraid to go all in on the concept and allow the character to be a little less human. After all, that's kind of what you would expect of a force of nature. But that's just what I think. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. There's a like button and a subscribe button down there. You can use those as you see fit, and I'll talk to you later.